Hi guys, I publish many novels in our Telegram. Each novel has its own exclusive Telegram channel packed with all chapters in high-quality audio. Plus, if the novel is ongoing, you'll get all future updates and releases automatically, no extra cost, no monthly payment. Just make a one-time payment via PayPal or Ko-fi and enjoy unlimited access forever. Don't miss out on the ultimate audiobook experience. Links in the description. If you can't support me financially, just like and subscribe our videos. Thank you guys, your support means a lot. And as always, enjoy Shadow. Chapter 536, Return 1. I can see the city walls in the distance. I pause to gaze at the distant walls, their dark, cracked surfaces resembling scars of varying sizes. Beyond them, towering spires and buildings reached skyward, piercing the now blue sky above. It was a view that starkly contrasted with that of when I had first arrived at the Eastern Kasha. This is as far as I can go, human. Almighty's voice echoed in my ears, its roots stretching deep beneath the ground, sinking ever lower. I think you should be fine following me. Rightfully so, Almighty was cautious not to draw the attention of the household heads from the main families in the Kasha. It would lead to unwarranted misunderstandings. For that reason, it had no choice but to wait outside. Now that I think about it, bringing Almighty back to the academy might also be somewhat troublesome. I sighed at the thought. There was no way Delilah or Atlas could fail to notice it. Had Almighty still been a will, things would have been different, but that was no longer the case, and so I had to think of a way to maneuver around that area. Whatever, I'll worry about that later. There were more pressing matters at hand. Like, did they lose or did they win? It took me some time to return from the mirror dimension. Though they assured me the area was clear and no one would come after me, I knew it was better to stay on the cautious side. For that reason, I moved with extreme caution, traveling slowly and doing my best to ensure no one was following or spying on me. With my new skill added to Almighty's heightened awareness, I was almost confident that nobody had followed me. With everything settled, I dismissed Lament of Lies and made my way toward the distant walls. The distance wasn't far, and by the time I walked for several minutes, I arrived before the broken walls, the distant shouts of the workers reaching my ears. This place needs fixing. Over here. Hurry up. It seemed quite lively in there. So much so that they didn't even notice my presence. The guards stationed atop the walls, however, did. They gave me a brief glance before allowing me through. Clearly, they still remembered my face. Coming into the city, my feet paused for a brief moment. Get your food over here. Seconds will only come after everyone has gotten their share. Please wait patiently. The scene looked drastically different from the first time that I was there. The air of gloom and despair had vanished, replaced by a sense of hope. Though everyone remained painfully thin and malnourished, their eyes no longer held that hollow, empty look. They felt alive. In a sense, they remind me of the old man in his last moments. Thinking about the old man, I felt a slight pang in my chest as I looked up towards the sky. The sky was the start of the change, the symbol of hope for this place. Without it, the Kasha would have stayed the same sickly, gloomy place it once was. It's a pity the people here don't know about the one who freed them. Shaking my head, I resumed walking, heading toward the Astrid household. It stood near the heart of the city, its tall, golden structure standing out from the rest. For now, the most important thing was to learn about the result of the fight. I hope they didn't lose. As I muttered those words, I found myself unknowingly quickening my pace. Astrid household. In a spacious room, all the cadets from Haven gathered, their bodies bathed in the soft sunlight streaming through the windows. The atmosphere was pleasant, with several of them sporting nice smiles. Kikik. Cackling to herself, Kira leaned back, her laughter growing louder as she continued. Sitting next to her, Aoife and Evelyn looked at her with weird looks before looking at each other and shaking their heads. She's lost it. Yes. Shut up, losers. Kira raised her head, glancing at the two of them before scanning the room. Her lips curled into a smirk as she tilted her head slightly upward, making it seem as though her nose was growing. She then pointed at herself. You twats should all call me the Messiah. Without me, you all wouldn't have won this entire thing. Yours truly is the one and only Savio, eh? You're getting way over your head. Aoife cut her off mid-sentence as she rolled her eyes. I get that you managed to beat the last member, but should I remind you how we all did the same thing? If it wasn't already obvious, they had managed to come out on top against the Kasha's finest talents. It was no easy conflict, with those from the Kasha being extremely strong. Unfortunately for them, there were several monsters in their team. Let alone Leon. Caius, Amel, and Kalian were freaks of nature, individuals so powerful that even those from the Kasha struggled to contend with them. This was especially so for Caius, who seemed to have gotten even stronger than before. The four of them managed to knock out their respective opponents, taking down the next ones as well before finally leaving, worn out from exhaustion. With the fight following a King of the Ring format, the team with the last person standing in their corner was set to claim victory. Those of the Kasha did bring out several monsters, some strong enough to force those four into a state of retreat. However, in the end, they still managed to come out on top. It was just unfortunate that Kira had to be the last one standing in the ring. With the last opponent tired, all she had to do was throw one spell before winning. Kakakakaka. Her victory only fueled her already inflated ego. They should start making a church just for me. The Church of Kira. Aoife's face winced, and so did Evelyn and several other people. Before things could escalate even further, a certain ringing sound caught everyone's attention. When all eyes turned, they landed on the small figure hunched in the corner, her bloodshot eyes fixed on the tiny device in front of her, her finger tapping repeatedly at the display. "It's not working," the small child mumbled to herself, bringing her thumb to her mouth and nervously chewing on her nails. How could this be? At the same time, she scratched the side of her neck. Aoife's expression changed as she pursed her lips. "This is getting out of hand. You need to do something about that," Evelyn said, her eyes falling on the hunched-over child. She looked no different than an addict battling their own demons. "You think I don't know?" The current state of Teresa was worrying. With no Justice Man transmissions, Teresa spiraled into a dark place. She now resembled a feral cat ready to pounce on anyone who dared to come too close. "My precious? In any case, what do you think will happen now that we've won?" Aoife suddenly asked, turning her attention towards Leon, who had been quietly staring at the window the entire time. "HM?" As if realizing she was talking to him, he blinked his eyes before replying. "I don't know. They'll probably tell us later. It's been several hours already since the fights." Aoife checked the time. 3 hours exactly. "Beats me, to be honest." Leon shrugged. "I'd say they are probably discussing with each other right now." "Well, no, soon enough. I guess that's fair. Considering how long the last meeting had dragged on, this sort of made sense. Whatever the case was, they had proven their strength. Now, it was up to them to uphold their promise. She had already sent a message back to the academy. They would be coming to pick them up soon. It was for that reason that she wasn't overly concerned about their safety. To talk. Suddenly, a knock echoed through the room and all eyes turned toward the door. "Are they here?" As everyone tensed and prepared to move, the door swung open, revealing a pair of hazel eyes. Stunned, no one spoke a word, standing frozen in place, unable to react to his sudden appearance. There was something about him that felt different than the past. He was strong, everyone knew that. In fact, he was probably the strongest in the entire room. However, the current him felt different than in the past. His presence alone almost felt suffocating. What happened? Did he become stronger again? The thought made the expressions of a few change. Unaware of their thoughts, Julian scanned the room, his gaze falling first on Leon and then the rest. They all were looking at him with the same stunned and confused expression. He scratched the back of his head. "I take it that you all lost." Julian closed his eyes and shook his head. "That's disappointing, honestly." His words only deepened the speechlessness, leaving the already stunned cadets at a complete loss for words. "Then again, it is also my fault for missing it. It couldn't be helped. Trouble just loved to find its way to him." Taking a seat next to Leon, Julian looked at him and shook his head. "I'm most disappointed in you, honestly." A question mark popped on top of Leon's head as his face changed in a way that seemed to say, "What did I even do?" It then clicked and his face fell. "Let me guess, I lost market value?" "You're disappointed because losing would mean I lose market value, right?" Julian tilted his head back, looking surprised. He was about to speak again when Leon cut him off. "How do I know?" Yet again, Julian looked surprised. Leon was reading his mind completely. "It's because you're predictable. All you do is recycle your old puns and insults. You're unoriginal and they're getting old." The room turned silent then, all eyes shifted on Julian, who blinked his eyes. Feeling everyone's gaze, Julian pursed his lips and looked away, his face looking indifferent. He seemed completely unfazed by Leon's words. A pity they couldn't see his vision. End of roof level 4. Sadness, EXP plus 0.2%. Or the subtle quivering of his lower lip. Chapter 537, Return 2. Sorry for the delay. It took quite a bit for us to figure out the logistics of the situation. We're done now, so if you would then. The head elder of the Astrid family entered the room where all the cadets were held. As she spoke, her eyes scanned the room before pausing at a familiar figure and her words stopped. "You're here?" She blinked to make sure she wasn't seeing wrong. Following the events of the match, she had been trying to look for him. His absence was quite noticeable, especially considering how powerful he was. If there was one person she was most worried about in the elimination games, it'd be him. Who would have thought that even without him they'd still lose? The empires are filled with monsters. The Kasha was lagging behind. If they were to catch up to them, then they'd need more time and, most importantly, resources. The exchange had opened the eyes of everyone present. A small smirk pulled at the head elder's features as she looked at Julian. Was this what you were trying to achieve by not coming to the exchange? Had he participated and won, some of the other house heads might not have been as persuaded. However, by choosing not to compete and allowing the others to take part, they effectively opened the house heads' eyes, revealing the gap between those from the Kasha and those from the empires. This made the negotiations extremely easy. Looking at Julian once more, Rosanna had to keep her smile in check. To think he'd think so far, the more she looked at him, the more impressed she became. Such a pity he wasn't from the Eastern Kasha. As she lamented her situation, she glanced at the others, a faint smile gracing her lips before reaching out her hand toward the door. "If you all would follow me, please." Despite her position, she spoke courteously, making the others feel more relaxed. "There's a lot that we need to discuss. In the meantime, those from your empires will be joining us soon." Rosanna could already feel the presence of several powerful figures approaching their location. They'd be here anytime soon. Following the others past a long and wide corridor, I scratched the back of my head. For some reason, my neck was incredibly itchy. That wasn't even the most troublesome part. Oddly enough, the way the head elder looked at me felt somewhat weird. Whenever our eyes met, she'd return a kind and warm smile. It feels like she's misunderstanding something. But what exactly? I wasn't too sure myself, but seeing how this wasn't a bad thing, I let it play on. She definitely misunderstood something. Leon mumbled as he walked beside me. When I turned my head toward him, I noticed Caius walking alongside him, his expression calm and indifferent, his eyes bobbing up and down in agreement. She did. You too? Leon ignored me and continued. I don't like this. He looked at his hands. I feel somewhat disgusted and I don't even know why. It's as if he's taking credit for something he didn't even do. Caius didn't answer but instead squinted his eyes. It's likely she believes Julian intentionally skipped the exchange to let us stand out. His absence allowed the group's strengths to shine, which might have made her negotiations with the other heads smoother since they didn't think we were as strong as them at the start. Oh wow. Caius' words struck me like a bolt of lightning. The warm yet pleasant gaze suddenly felt clear to me and the corner of my lip couldn't help but twitch. Is that so? Well, it was the furthest thing from the truth, but in hindsight, his words do indeed make sense. Especially considering the timing at which I came back. What a pleasant coincidence. What bullshit. Of course, Leon was anything but happy with the situation. But what could he even do in this situation? He had no idea where I had run off to, and as long as I didn't deny it, he wouldn't be able to say anything. Ah, how satisfying. My chest unknowingly rose as I glanced at Leon. From his squinted eyes to his downward curving lips, he looked like someone who had just eaten shit. What a satisfying expression. It was such a pity that I didn't have my camera with me. If only. We're here. The head elder's voice pulled me from my thoughts as she led us into a vast hall. Upon entering, I noticed several dozen people gathered, some familiar, others unfamiliar. The hall was expansive, with tall pillars lining the sides, a spotless marble floor gleaming beneath our feet, and bright lights illuminating the space from above. As we entered, all eyes fell on us. I've brought them. Standing beside the head elders, I also noticed the professors from the academy who had been summoned earlier by the head elder. They looked somewhat embarrassed by our presence. It couldn't be helped they had been practically useless the entire time. Not that I blamed them, Julian's mother's spell had targeted them first, forcing them to leave us and create trouble with the other walls. I'm sure they'll get scolded by the academy. I hope they did. This way, they wouldn't send us out again. Even if the situation within the academy was worse. I was rather exhausted. It's a pity that I can't really decide how much I can rest. It all came down to the quests. While I wasn't exactly obligated to complete them, the rewards were far too valuable for me to pass up. I've already given the professors a brief overview of our agreement, but I'll go over it again so all of you can hear. Rosanna Astrid began speaking, training our eyes in our direction while speaking. Given your role in helping us resolve many of our issues, the agreements will be extended to your houses individually. Eh? What did she just? Several of the cadets showed looks of surprise, unable to fully understand the situation. I was also confused, not fully grasping the situation. The only one who seemed to fully grasp the weight of the head elder's words was Aoife. Her eyes widened in surprise as she quietly mumbled, "No way." Given her shock, this was surely something big. I licked my lips in anticipation. I see that many of you are confused. What does it mean for our agreement to extend to your houses individually? She suddenly smiled. It means what it means. We will not have any trade deals with the empires, but your houses individually. The profits from the exchange will be shared amongst us in a 50-50 split. The head elder then began pointing at several people. Generally, they were the ones who had participated in the exchange, with me being the only exception. Either way, it didn't really matter. Leon and I belong to the same household. Of the houses we've agreed to sign exclusive trading deals with, you 11 are the ones we believe have the most promising futures and are therefore capable of upholding these deals in the long term. I could see the disappointment on the faces of several of the cadets who weren't selected, but I understood where the head elder was coming from. What she wanted was to maintain a good relationship with the top elites. She likely saw us as the future leaders of the 4 empires, and by securing trade deals with us, she aimed to maintain a close relationship. It was also a means to have us connected with them. Considering the enormous profits the trades would bring to our households, if anything were to happen to them, would have no choice but to come to their aid unless, of course, we no longer cared for the profits, which was unlikely. We were talking about a lot of money here. This was generally good news, but I couldn't help but feel a little annoyed. It would be nice if my household were a good one, but considering the kind of person the family head is, I'm not so sure a sudden deal like this would be a good thing. The deal would be like giving wings to a tiger. There weren't many people who could scare me at this point, but something about Aldrich genuinely made me feel uneasy. He was someone that I couldn't read at all, and he was also someone who seemed to be able to read me completely. I didn't know how to feel about the current deal. The household becoming stronger and richer would benefit me too, especially if I want to acquire the mirror crack in Elner. But that's only if he's willing to provide the money for it. Once this was over, I needed to talk with Aldrich again in order to strike a deal with him. I'm sure I can work something out. For those that haven't been called out, please don't worry. I'm sure all of you can understand that we can't simply strike a deal with everyone. The reason why we chose the 11 of them is due to their contributions and talents. The head elder didn't mince her words. She directly told things as I figured them out to be. However, just because we aren't striking a deal with your family doesn't mean we aren't doing anything for you. If it's monetary compensation you're seeking for helping us here, we can provide it. If there's a resource you need, feel free to come to our treasury and take whatever you want. As friends of the Kasha, we will naturally treat you well. Her words brought light to some of the cadets who previously looked disappointed. While their rewards paled in comparison to ours, which would bring a lot of money to our households, their rewards were also quite good. I watched the scene and nodded to myself. I guess that's fair. Number. I was a little envious though. I also wanted to choose something from that. Want some? Sure. Something sweet entered my mouth and I started chewing on it. In any case, how is it? Pretty good. A little too sweet though, My body froze suddenly as I raised my head. A pair of black eyes stared back at me, squinting at the side as if amused by my reaction, and my heart tightened in response. Looking around me and seeing the world freeze, something formed at my throat as I managed a soft mumble. When did? Chapter 538, Return 3. The surroundings were still. It was as if time itself had stopped, and as I looked around, I found myself unable to utter a single word. How did she? No, more importantly, when did you get here? Delilah tilted her head and popped a chocolate bar into her mouth, her eyes squinting slightly at the corners as she savored the rich, satisfying taste. Indeed, chocolate was one of the few rare things that could get her face to change. The tip of her tongue lightly licked her coral lips. I was here the entire time. Eh? No, you weren't. I thought about it for a while but held my tongue. She probably meant she had been here since the start of the meeting. Did nobody notice you? Even if they tried, they wouldn't be able to. Right? I then looked around and stared at the people around me, frozen in place. I couldn't really grasp what was happening around me, but if there was one thing that I could tell, it was one thing. She's gotten stronger again. I had never seen the full extent of Delilah's strength in the past. I knew she was strong, but never to the extent. I could only make a few guesses based on the pressure that she gave out in her actions. This time, however, I clearly felt something different from her. She's exuding the same pressure the old man had just before he passed away. My mouth went dry and I licked my lips. A thought occurred to me and something pressed against the back of my throat. Don't tell me she's close to reaching the zenith. Could she really do it? What are you thinking so deeply about? I was you're too close. When I lifted my head to respond, I suddenly realized she was standing just a few inches away, her gaze fixed intently on my nose. My heart almost leaped out of my chest as I took a step back, but before I could even do so, a hand pressed against my shoulder. Stay. What? Why? What are you looking at? You. Eh? You. Once again, I licked my lips. My gaze dropped briefly, following Delilah's eyes as her lashes fluttered. Because of how close we were, I almost felt like they might brush against me if either of us moved. When I leaned back against one of the pillars, Delilah's head followed like a magnet. She just wouldn't look away from me, and as I found myself looking at her features, an undeniable tension coursed through me. She was undeniably beautiful, I knew that. And because I knew it, I also knew I had to walk away. Dangerous, she was too dangerous. Dangerous? What is? I pursed my lips. Did I say that out loud? I almost wanted to slap myself, but as I was about to answer, I suddenly noticed Delilah's lips curl into what looked like a smile. A teasing one. She knew. You've gotten stronger. Cutting me off, Delilah switched the conversation. Your rate of progress is very fast. Her words contained a hint of something, but I kept silent. I couldn't tell her that I had cheated with the quests. Besides, I was certain she was already accustomed to my progress being like this. At least, as far as I'm aware of. She just never really showed it. As a matter of fact, she never really showed much. In any case, did you stop time just to tell me that? That was a bit, how should I say, extra? No. Though Delilah said that, her gaze turned sideways. She seemed to be avoiding eye contact. Tilting my head, she tilted her head further. As expected, this really was the case. I had plenty of questions swirling in my mind at that moment, but it felt like pushing further probably wasn't the right thing to do. In the end, I just laughed. What? Why? It only seemed to confuse her, but all it did was make me laugh even more. Why? I can't believe they're willing to strike a deal with our houses. How much money do you think we're going to make? A lot, probably. Phew-uck. The meeting stretched on for several hours, with the house heads outlining the terms of the deal and how things would unfold from here on. Since none of us were in control of our families yet, we had to send our house representatives to negotiate on our behalf. Everything went smoothly, and most importantly, nobody seemed to have noticed Delilah at all. She had been standing there beside everyone the whole time, yet no one seemed to notice her at all. It was as if she was a ghost. Was this some sort of new skill of hers, or was it something she could have done since the start? If she really could have done this from the start, why in the world did she polymorph into a child so often? I silently clicked my tongue before tossing the issue to the back of my mind. There were more pressing matters at hand. Are you going to contact him? I'm thinking about it. You should. I know. So do it. You talk too much. Leon's constant nagging was starting to give me a headache. I understood where he was coming from, but the last thing I wanted to do was talk to the family head. He gave me the creeps. If you keep dragging this, then I might do it in your stead. Would you actually? I looked at Leon with a hopeful look. If he did it then. No. Ah. So he's also scared of the family head. Pussy. Leon raised his brow, looking at me an expression that seemed to say, coming from you of all people. I ignored him and massaged my face. Fine. In the end, with no other option, I pulled out my communication device and tried to get in touch with Aldrich. The first thing I did was send him a message. One that went, if you aren't busy, call me. There's something I'd like to contact you for. I sat there, fiddling with the communication device in my hand for a minute after sending the message until it finally started vibrating. I stared at it with a complicated expression for a moment before finally answering. Inverness County. It was eerily quiet within Inverness County. With all major issues resolved, the county was experiencing unprecedented growth. Their progress was so remarkable that all the major noble houses were closely monitoring their development. If their growth had only been a result of recent events, none of the major houses would have paid much attention to them. But now things were different. Within the household, there were two figures whose presence drew the attention of many. The twin stars of the Inverness household. With talents that could be considered the pinnacle of the four empires, all eyes were fixed on them. If nothing went wrong, there was a very real possibility that one of them would become the next monarch. No, not just one, perhaps there was even the possibility of both of them becoming monarchs. This wasn't something the other noble houses could take lightly. A monarch represented the pinnacle of power, standing at the top of the world. For there to be two such individuals, well, the implications were immense. That was why the Inverness household was under such close scrutiny. Many were going to great lengths to win their favor, offering various incentives and even proposing marriage alliances. Of course, for every house eager to form alliances, there were those who were less than welcoming. This was especially true for those who had past conflicts with the Inverness household or one of their allied houses, the Verlies household. As a result, finances began to tighten within the household. Many major forces imposed heavy tariffs on their goods or outright refused to trade with them. This put a heavy burden on their finances, especially at a time when they required a lot of capital in order to recover from the recent war the household had sustained. The lack of capital wasn't something that could be easily fixed, forcing Aldrich to rack his brain for a solution for a long time. He had all sorts of different ways to solve the capital problem, but all these problems would require time, which they lacked. The situation was grim. Or at least, that was how it was supposed to be at first. It was then that he received a strange message from his son. Pardon? The corner of Aldrich's mouth twitched ever so slightly as he overheard Julian's words. He had to do a double take on the news he had just received, struggling to fully grasp the situation. The Eastern Kasha wishes to cooperate with our household. They're offering us trade rights to several exclusive products from their territory. Upon hearing the news again, Aldrich remained quiet for a few seconds in order to absorb the information. The Eastern Kasha. What did it mean to gain exclusive trading rights with them? Aldrich's mind went into overdrive, a flurry of different products flashing before his eyes as he considered the possibilities. From shadow stones to mana gems, the Eastern Kasha had an array of products that could be sold for enormous profits. If what Julian said was true, this could be a massive opportunity for the household. If they played their cards right, they could solve all their financial issues and then some. Aldrich's mind was quick to calculate everything, and his face eventually cooled. They wish for us to send a representative from our side in order to. Who else has been given such a deal? Yes? Confused, Julian stopped. After a short while, he answered. Leon, Aoife, Kira, Evelyn, Aim. Refuse it. Julian's stunned voice reached Aldrich's ears. Did I hear that right? Did you just? Yes, refuse the offer. Make sure everyone sees it and request something else for your reward. That? Julian was confused at first, but soon something clicked in his mind. Wait, don't tell me. Given our current situation, accepting the deal would lead to unnecessary trouble. I want you to refuse their offer publicly. Julian didn't answer immediately. He seemed to be absorbed in his own thoughts before he carefully opened his mouth. But only as a ruse, correct? Correct. Aldrich answered while licking his lips. His greed was practically radiating from him, manifesting into a large, sinister demon that seemed to claw its way up from his chair. Well, have the Verlies family act as our intermediary or ghost merchant. Given that they have their own deal, nothing will look suspicious. Their wealth will skyrocket, and before long, they'll be one of the wealthiest households around. At that point, you'll have them pull away from us as we struggle with our finances. Aldrich started explaining, the demon behind him becoming more and more corporeal. Eventually, they'll be approached by the other households, particularly those who might be against us. And with our finances being quite low, they might try to. Aldrich stopped there, but his plan was now clear. His greed was clear. It was so clear that, despite Julian's best efforts, he couldn't stop himself from breathing heavily. This lunatic, Julian thought, his grip over the communication becoming tighter. He wants to swallow several households at once again. Chapter 539, Return 4. That's it. He didn't even give me a chance to get a word in before hanging up, leaving me completely at a loss. I sat on my spot, staring speechlessly at the communication device in my hand, unsure of what to do next. What sort of situation is this? How did it go? Leon leaned closer to me as he asked his question. I tilted my head away before replying. Too damn close. Terrible. The conversation merely lasted a few minutes, and yet all it took was those 10 minutes to make my stomach churn. As expected, I really don't want to interact with him. I felt like puking whenever I did. With that being said, I didn't really have a choice. He was the family head, and so what choice did I have? And in my own twisted way, I also found myself wanting to learn from him. How was he able to think so far with just bits and pieces of information? How was he always so cool-headed? Was it merely a disguise like the one I put on, or was he truly just naturally cool-headed? There were a lot of things that I could learn from him. It was just that. I can't stand being in a room with him for longer than 10 minutes. Any longer than that and I feel like puking. I internally sighed to myself before shifting my attention towards Leon, who had been patiently waiting for me to continue. Judging from his grim expression, he also felt the same way as me. He wants me to refuse the offer. Oh, just refusing? Eh? At first, Leon looked relieved, but as my words began to sink in, his eyes started to widen. What did you just say? He wants to refuse. What? Why? Just a name. Considering the current state of the family, a deal like this would shatter the fragile balance we've managed to maintain with the other houses watching us like hawks. As if piecing it all together, Leon's eyes widened further. Slowly, he began filling in the words I hadn't yet said. Accepting the offer would force those houses to immediately take action against our house. Exactly. If the deal went through and the Ivinus household was left unchecked, it would undoubtedly grow into a powerhouse that only the royal family and the duchies could rival. They'd have no choice but to attack us unless they don't want to be suppressed in the future. Everyone knew what sort of character Aldrich Ivinus was. At least, they had become clear of it after the most recent war. He was an extremely greedy person who spared nothing to expand his territory. Leon's face suddenly grew serious. Eventually, with his brows furrowing tightly, he opened his mouth to speak. I'm starting to understand why he asked you to refuse, but this doesn't sound like something the family head would. Like I said in name. I cut Leon off, glancing around to ensure no one was eavesdropping on our conversation. Although we were already speaking in low tones, I took an extra precaution and activated Lament of Lies to mask our voices, making our discussion sound like an ordinary one to anyone nearby. An amazing perk of the new skill. There's no way the family head we both know would actually want us to pass up such a lucrative deal. He just wants us to pretend to refuse the offer and, instead, negotiate for personal rewards. Leon's expression shifted abruptly as he began to grasp the family head's true intentions. Judging by the way he suddenly closed his eyes and leaned back, it was clear he wasn't exactly thrilled with the arrangement. Couldn't really blame him, I wasn't too. On the surface, he wants to make us appear like selfish brats who care only about our personal glory, completely indifferent to the struggles of our household, especially with the aftermath of the recent war putting such a heavy financial strain on us. Leon's upper brow twitched as I spoke. No matter how understanding he was, being told that people would view us as selfish brats never felt good. In reality, he wants the deal to remain secret. With the Verlies family, one of the families selected by the Kasha for trade, the family head plans to have them take our share of the tradable goods and handle the transactions for us, secretly paying us the profits from the trade. Of course, the only ones who would know of this were our family and the Verlies family. On the outside, our family will appear to be struggling because of our choices, while the Verlies family will experience unprecedented growth from the trade deal. With a stronger foundation than ours, they'll be able to expand without facing much difficulty. Their growth would likely attract a lot of attention, drawing focus away from the Ivinus household and allowing it to grow in secret. Gradually, as the Verlies family grows and ours starts to decline, a wedge will appear between us. Some sort of serious conflict can even occur, attracting the attention of the many houses that were previously trying to keep ours in check. Of course, this was merely an act. When everything is set in stone, they'll eventually realize it was all a ruse, but by then they'll be caught off guard and attacked by both the Verlies and our household. In short, the family head was planning on swallowing even more territories. By that point, the growth of the Ivinus household would have reached a terrifying level, so much so that I feared it might even surpass that of the duchies, inevitably drawing the attention of the royal family. Considering their tyrant rule of the empire, I was sure the royal family wouldn't leave the Ivinus household alone. There had to be a limit to someone's greed. Who? Leon took a deep breath beside me, his expression tense. He seemed completely at a loss for words, unsure of how to process the news. When he did speak, he directly asked, "What are you planning on doing? Are you going through with the plan?" I'm not sure. There was quite a lot I could gain from this. If I followed the family head's instructions, I was certain he'd provide me with the funds needed to bid for the mirror crack near Elner when the time came. There was still time until then, and the money was necessary. My financial capital was closely tied to the households. Following his words would certainly bring me a lot of benefits, but at the same time I was worried. I was worried about the future consequences that my actions would bring. I thought Leon was the same, but contrary to my expectations, Leon appeared to be on board with the plan. "I think we should do it." "Ah?" I blinked my eyes in confusion. Did he just? If my guess is correct, this plan could take quite a while to come to fruition, anywhere from 3 to 7 years. Yes, but in that time, we can probably grow by a lot. Leon's words made me pause and think. 3 to 7 years? By then, I would certainly be much stronger, especially if the quests remained consistent. Still, I wasn't sure how much I would grow. The higher one climbed, the steeper the path became. Each tier had a barrier one had to surpass in order to reach the next tier, with people being stuck in the same tier for a very long time. An example was the 5th tier. There were countless cases of individuals getting stuck in the fourth tier, spending years just to develop their domain. Not everyone was like Delilah, who seemed to break through each tier without getting stuck for a very long time. It wasn't Delilah's rate of growth that made her so feared. No, while her growth was impressive, it wasn't what truly set her apart from the others. What made her stand out was her lack of setbacks during her path to the top. If I continue to grow at the rate that I'm growing, perhaps in 7 years I won't be too far off from reaching the Monarch rank. Delilah was 27 when she reached the Monarch rank. I paled in comparison to her when it came to raw talent, but I had the quests. Not only that, but I could probably grow even further if I killed monsters, which was why the mirror crack was so important to me. If push came to shove, it wasn't entirely impossible for me to reach her level by then. And once I reached the Monarch rank, there would be very few things that could truly scare me. It's as Leon said, by the time the situation reaches a boiling point, we might have enough strength to not care about it. In the meantime, we can reap the benefits of the deal to help us become stronger. Whew. I let out a long and exhausted breath, feeling my body sink into the chair. Lifting my head to look around me, I saw everyone discussing with one another, their expressions somewhat happy. This was a big deal for quite a few. I could see some talking to the head elder, trying to talk terms with her as she smiled and answered all of the questions. I glanced at Leon beside me and he nodded in acknowledgement. I returned the gesture with a nod of my own. All right, he'll do it. I stood up and walked in the direction of the head elder. As if noticing me, she smiled and the people talking to her paused, turning to look at me. Suddenly, I felt several pairs of eyes fixate on me as I stood before the head elder. It suddenly grew quiet, or it felt like it did. In any case, this does seem to be fitting for the character that I've built. Inwardly smiling, I parted my lips and spoke, my tone deliberate and loud enough for everyone to hear. I've thought about the deal that you've proposed, and after a little bit of thought, I've decided to reject the trade deal. All noise ceased and all eyes turned in my direction. I continued, the trade deal would bring no direct benefit to me and mostly to the family head. For that reason, I'd like to change my reward. Even the head elder looked utterly confused by my words, her eyes widening. I'd like a reward fitting for my contributions. Chapter 540, Return 5. The request obviously took everyone by surprise. Everyone looked at me as though I was a complete fool, including the head elder. So you're saying that it was all a show? It took a while to explain everything to her. Sitting in her office, she leaned back in her chair, her fingers tapping rhythmically against the table. Sitting on the chair opposite her, I nodded my head. Yes, basically. Looking at her, she didn't seem very pleased with my stunt. It couldn't be helped. I had to make sure everyone saw it. I was sure news of my actions was going to make its way into the ears of everyone in the Empire. Our household can't afford to take on the deal openly. Given that we've just emerged from a large conflict, we had no choice but to resort to such a tactic. I see. Rosanna Astrid seemed more understanding when I explained to her a small part of our circumstances. Eventually she sighed. All right, this is also possible. You said you will be working with the Verlice family? Yes. She nodded slightly before standing up. I understand, I'll make sure to do as you've requested. Considering your contributions to our region, it is only right that we do this. In fact, even this doesn't cover everything that you've done for us. If you do need anything else, please let us know. Will do. I thought about asking them for resources, but I actually didn't need them. What I needed right now was time to grow and consolidate all of my skills. I planned on keeping this favor for the near future when I needed it. All right, you may go. Without speaking, I nodded quietly and stood up. Just as I stood, I saw her open her mouth as she tried to say something, but she eventually stopped herself and shook her head. What's that about? Although I was confused since she chose not to finish her sentence, I could only retreat silently and leave the room. I didn't want her to change her mind all of a sudden. Clank. Watching the door close and Julian's figure disappear, Rosanna stood in place for several seconds before letting out a gentle sigh. Turning around, she gazed out the window, letting the gentle afterglow of the sun wash over her. Lifting her head, she stared at the distant blue sky. Several days had passed since the sky had turned blue and everything felt different. The heavy gloom that once seeped into the very bones of the city had lifted. In its place, an air of hope blanketed the streets and its people. From the smiles to the looks, everything about the people had changed. It's a nice parting gift. She gently pressed her hand against the glass window. Staring towards the sky, her lips gently pulled upwards as she thought of a certain figure. She, like most of the other elders, understood the kind of cage the former head had been forced to live in. They had been told all about it from the master of the former head. They knew he didn't have much time, and they've witnessed his rapid aging with time. And yet, they could do nothing about it. He was the sole reason the Astrid family could live at the top of the other households. In their own selfish way, they were the reason for his suffering. To talk. A gentle knock suddenly echoed through the room, prompting Rosanna to turn her head. Come in. A figure with long, wavy brown hair and delicate features stepped in shortly after her words faded, carrying a small box in her hand. It was none other than Cora, one of the 7 spears of the Astrid family. Noticing the box immediately, Rosanna raised her brow. That is? I am not too sure, head elder. She placed the box on the table while taking a peek at the window behind the head elder. I chanced upon it right before coming here. It was given to me by Julian, who told me to pass it to you, saying something about forgetting to return it. This? Rosanna glanced at the box on the table. She felt that the box was vaguely familiar, but she couldn't quite place where she had seen it before. Is there anything else? No. Cora shook her head. I wasn't planning on disturbing you. I only came in here to hand in the box. Then you may go. Understood. Bowing once, Cora quietly left the room, leaving the head elder alone with her thoughts. As a strange silence filled the room, Rosanna glanced at the box on the desk before pressing on it. Duh. A note suddenly played. Duh, duh. One note followed by another and then another, slowly coming together to form a familiar tune. Overhearing the tune, Rosanna froze in place before. Duh, 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 eh. Bursting into a bright smile. Is everyone present? We will be leaving shortly. Announcing our departure was none other than Delilah. Finally deciding to show up, she startled those from the Kasha, but once they realized she was with us, they greeted her warmly. Given the fact that she's here, I presume that the situation within the academy has calmed down? Now that I thought about it, what could have caused such a phenomenon to occur? Was it just naturally occurring, or was it artificial? A part of me hoped for the former to be true, but deep down, I knew that wasn't the case. This was certainly a man-made event. But what exactly was the reason for this? Why did they do this? If there's anything that you want to do before leaving, do it now. You have approximately 1 hour left. As Delilah's voice reached my ears again, I raised my head to see her calmly observing us with her usual indifferent expression. Standing where I was, she looked different somehow. Everything about her felt different. She felt like an existence that stood above all of us. Especially that detached expression of hers. She really didn't feel like the Delilah I knew. Of course, I knew this was merely a front. She's probably thinking about chocolate deep down. I reached for my pocket where I felt a chocolate bar and slowly pulled it out. Flick. As if her head were a magnet, her gaze flicked in my direction. I stood calmly while opening the wrapper. Her face showed signs of change, but she just managed to keep herself composed. Barely. I took a bite of the chocolate. So damn sweet. I hated it. But I didn't dislike the repercussions of my actions. With a subtle tremble in her expression, barely perceptible to those around us, Delilah's eyes narrowed. I felt my body freeze at the sight of her eyes, almost as though invisible dark hands were reaching out for me from beneath me, trying to grasp me and pull me down into an endless abyss of despair. How scary. I took another bite. Delilah's face showed even more cracks. Lately, I felt like she had been teasing me a little bit too much. I took another bite. It was my third bite, and looking at the bar, I was surprised to see that it was almost fully eaten. In such a pig, I brought the chocolate bar next to my mouth again. Or at least tried to. Why? A certain voice reached my ears. The feeling came from right in front of me, and when I looked up, I found a pair of black eyes staring deeply into mine. Oh, it's you. I nodded before bringing the bar close to my mouth. But just as the bar was about to reach my lips, a hand clamped against my forearm. Why? I licked my lips and looked around me. As expected, time was frozen again. What a broken ability. Surely there had to be some sort of limit. Why what? You this? Delilah alternated her gaze between the chocolate bar and me. I frowned and pretended to be in deep thought before coming to an understanding. Ah, so you want it too? Yes. Delilah nodded her head, her face stern while her eyes seemed to scream, give it. I see, how silly of me. Yes, so give? All right, just let me go. It was only then that Delilah let go of my hand. Just as she was about to open her mouth to speak again, I hastily shoved the chocolate bar into my mouth, much to her utter shock and dismay. You. Delilah took a step back, her face pale. Holding on to her chest, her lips quivered as she looked at me. From her expression, it almost felt like I had just committed an unforgivable crime, like I had killed her entire family. I didn't care and just savored the taste. Taste like shit. But the spectacle before me made the taste worth it. Ah, this. Biting her lips, Delilah leaned against one of the pillars. Right now, she was the embodiment of despair, as if the closest person to her had betrayed her, driving a knife deep into her back. It was a good thing that time had stopped, otherwise everyone would have looked at the scene in utter shock. Was this the same chancellor who looked so imposing in mighty moments prior? Kaka oops. I covered my mouth when I noticed that I was suddenly about to laugh like Kira. This isn't good. She's already corrupted Aoife and Evelyn. I can't let her behavior corrupt me as well. It was right when I thought about Kira when I found myself looking at her. A thought suddenly occurred to me. Right, shouldn't I ask her about the mirror? If there was ever a time to ask, it was now. Before, I had hesitated to bring it up while we were in the Empire. If what she possessed was a relic similar to the sword I had, I feared it might draw the attention of Cithras. However, things were different now. If she pulled the relic here, would Cithras notice? Maybe. But by the time he arrived, we could very well have left the place. Of course, that's granted the fact that she has it. I also needed to find a way to approach her with regard to the topic. I thought about telling her about my situation with the other Julian, or more like, a parasitic entity trying to devour me from within. However, what I struggled to answer was how I knew she had the mirror. I didn't want her to be suspicious about the fact that I was from the inverted sky. That'll be challenging, but I think I can. I felt a cool touch beneath my jaw, gently pulling my head away from Kira and toward a pair of deep black eyes that bore into me with an unsettling intensity. Stop looking. A cold voice followed. Eh? You've already betrayed me once. I can't forgive too. I blinked my eyes for a brief moment, processing her words. Then, Ah,